All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. What are we talking about today? Well, the title of the show, Big Spending Bureaucrats Are on the Rise. That's kind of like has always been in a sense. But there used to be more talk about economic freedom, just economic issues. But it seems like we're getting caught up too much in culture wars and other things. And our bureaucrats, well, they've been long getting away with being really big government and been big spenders. So let me pull up this article here real quick. We'll just kind of get started right here. So this is from Reason Magazine. And it's titled Economic Liberty Now Has No Place in Either Party. The rise of neo-populism means those who prioritize free markets have no political home. And I kind of agree. Now, let's see what some of the article has to say. Where did it go here? Where's my where? Oh, there we go. That's what I was looking for. All right. So let's try this. Did I get it right? Is it not working right? I'm being uncooperative. There we go. How about that? There. Apologies for that, folks. All right. So it says for years, populists on both the left and right have griped that Washington is in the thrall of libertarians, market fundamentalists, or perhaps neoliberals, despite the rarity of any politically powerful figure identifying as such. I'm not sure that I agree with that. But maybe, I guess. That's an interesting line to lead with. But then it goes on to say that in turn has created a new class of politically homeless. Call them fusionist, call them classical liberals, call them libertarians, but those who prioritize economic liberty have essentially no place in either party, in either major party. Absolutely agree. That's a significant shift away from foundational American values and an unsettling departure from the worldview that made America prosperous and powerful. Also agree. It goes on to say modern Democrats have never exactly been the party of limited government, but Harris looks primed to expand on the big government largesse of the Biden era, during which the party pursued a variety of policies designed to prop up labor unions and industrial policy to support favored industries and factory jobs through multiple large scale spending bills. And then the last little clip here, she's also proposing a large scale program of subsidies for first time home buyers, paired with $40 billion in tax incentives for builders to construct new homes. If Biden was a big government liberal, then Harris is a bigger government liberal. And the article then goes on to really kind of focus on JD Vance and Trump. And today, what I want to do is I actually want to focus on not those two, but Kamala Harris, and then kind of bring in Gavin Newsom. And we're going to do this through somewhat of I'm going to weave into this episode a bill review. So let me go ahead and play this media clip. And this is a bill, it's Assembly Bill 1840 out of California. So let's kind of see where we can weave all this in together. Let's see here.
A proposed bill working its way through Sacramento could make it easier for undocumented immigrants to purchase a home in California. It's called AB 1840.
AB 1840 adds specific wording to the California Dream for All program, which is the state's down payment assistance program. The wording would make undocumented immigrants able to apply for this money. I spoke with the author of the bill and the local politician against it.
We said it was a dream for all, that's what we meant.
Assemblyman Dr. Joaquin Arambula from Fresno is the author of AB 1840. The bill says that applicants of the state's Dream for All program should not be disqualified based on their immigration status.
Now, I want to pause here. We'll take a look at the bill and the language and all that because there's some interesting things there. But I just want to point out that's basically the bill right there. That's effectively everything that you need to know about the bill. Like if you don't listen, I mean, and you should listen to the rest of the episode because there's more here. But if you walk away with anything, that is basically the bill that's in California that's being voted on right now as we speak. So I just want to kind of point that out. All right, let's continue on here. There we go.
The Dream for All program is a down payment assistance program for low to moderate income aspiring homeowners. Those selected get a 20% down payment on a home that has to be paid back plus interest if the homeowner sells it.
For many people who have been here for years, if not decades, because we have a broken immigration system, who have been paying taxes and doing their hard work as well of building up a credit score, that we need to figure out how to open doors for all people to realize that dream of homeownership.
We shouldn't move people to the front of the line that haven't paid their dues.
El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells, who's also running for Congress, says he disagrees with AB 1840. He says the money for the California Dream for All Act should only go to legal U.S. citizens and veterans assistance programs.
They should be first in line to buy homes and to get assistance, not people that to work for this country. And, in fact, some that come from countries that our young men and women were actually fighting against.
Assemblyman Arambula says the money in the Dream.
That's quite, I mean, he's like, some of these immigrants, his argument is like, hey, these veterans who should get first priority, this is a big problem because we're going to give money potentially to immigrants who came from a country that these veterans were fighting. And so therefore you shouldn't give them money. That's a weird argument, I think, because if somebody can come to this country and fit in, then it doesn't matter whether we were at war with them once upon a time, or that we were in conflict. So that in itself, I mean, trust me, I've got plenty of problems with this bill, but I just think that in terms of opposing it, that's a weird argument. But anyway, that's, maybe I'm just weird.
For All program should be available to everyone who qualifies, which means they have to have a social security number or an I-10 number. He says there are already programs for veterans and more in the works.
We're passing housing bonds that ultimately will allow us to bring resources specifically for our veterans and look forward to the opportunity to make sure that we're able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
I don't understand why we're letting people that have lived here all their lives and sometimes for generations twist in the wind and not be able to afford their own home.
So if passed and signed by the governor, AB 1840 could go into effect in January of 2025.
Okay. So what's the takeaway from that video? That both sides of the aisle, just kind of like Reason said, they're all about spending money. It was just a matter of on who gets this money. So the argument, and I want to point out, this is very important. The argument that is being had, now I get it, this is the context of a bill that's specifically saying, hey, if you're an illegal immigrant, you shouldn't be excluded. But the ultimately, what's being argued is not, hey, how can we be more fiscally responsible? How can we talk about economic issues? How can we stop some of this government spending? No, it's arguing over who should get it. Because they've already come to an agreement. Spend money. Both of them. Both sides. And that's, I think that's something worth noting from that Reason article where they said, what was the headline? It was a great headline. Economic liberty now has no place in either party. By the way, it still has a place in the Libertarian Party. Okay. Just want to point that out to folks. There is an option out there. In fact, if you're voting locally, there may be even many options depending on where you are. We have candidates running from local to national. And the Libertarian Party is and has been and will continue to be the party that supports economic freedom. That's that, because like we literally talk about taxation is theft. Well, what does that mean? It means if you take any money from somebody to give it to somebody else, well, no, if you take any money, doesn't matter what you're doing with it. If you take any money from somebody, they're not giving it. You take it. It's theft. And it doesn't matter whether you passed a law that says we can take it. It's still theft. If I didn't want you to take my money and you take it anyway, it's theft. That's how it works. Whether it's my neighbor or my bureaucratic, council member. Taking money is taking money. So I think this is a very important conversation to have. Now let's take a look at this bill. And this is because there's a couple of interesting things out of there. Because if you thought that was the end of it, it's not quite. It just happens to be that's the primary thing that you've got going on. So let's pull that up here real quick. All right, and there we go. I think we got the bill up on the screen. Totally, is that right? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right, so this is 5 pages. And most of it, in fairness, is to remove certain statute. We're not going to worry too much about that. I generally approve of removing statute, but it looks like they're going to replace something. So just kind of skim down here. If you go ahead and look, you can see right here where it says section 51523 of the Health Safety Code is amended to read. And so they're scratching all of this out. And so I'm not going to worry about all that. That's just getting rid of stuff. And but here's where I want to. Let's go down here. It says existing law. It continues on, and it removes some language. So they're going to be. Let's see, where is this here? An act to add section 51344 to the Health and Safety Code relating to housing and making appropriation therefore. Okay. And so we'll go down. We don't need to look at everything, but here, existing law requires on or after July 1st, 2016, unobligated amounts remaining in any fund established for specified purposes to be transferred to the fund for expenditure by the agency for the purposes of this program. So they have this program that's going to help out first-time buyers. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment here. And what they're saying now in this bill is that if you have other programs, other funding that's been established, and they've got extra money, well, that extra money needs to be diverted over here. So that's interesting. Now, because what they're basically saying is we know we're about to spend a whole buttload more of money. So let's make sure that we find ways to have more money. And one of them is to say, all right, legally now, if this fund over here, maybe this fund that is funding the veterans happens to have extra money, then that extra money has to go to this program. So in a way, like they're still going to screw over the veterans because the veterans didn't necessarily get all that money if the money hasn't been spent for whatever reason. Now, you could make some arguments and you could say, well, some of these funds are, require that people, apply, and, if veterans don't apply to a particular program, and I'm just making this up. I don't know that there's a particular program for veterans, but I'm just using it as an example. But suppose that there is a fund that goes toward veterans that veterans have to apply for. And let's say that a bunch of veterans don't apply for it. Maybe they don't know about it. Maybe the process is too difficult. Maybe, maybe any number of things. But for whatever reason, they don't apply or they get denied or whatever. The money's not spent on them. So if there's extra money left over, well, it goes to this program, which is now cannot limit people based on their immigration status. So then it goes on to say, this bill would specify that an applicant who meets all other requirements for a loan under the program, including but not limited to any requirements imposed on the agency in administering the program by specified entities, and who is otherwise eligible under applicable federal law and federal and state law, shall not be disqualified solely based on an applicant's immigration status. So and then I don't have this highlighted, but down here it says by expanding the persons eligible to receive monies from a continuously appropriated fund, this bill would make an appropriation, right? So like they know that this is a continuously appropriated fund because it has to be. It has to be continued because how many illegal immigrants you going to get? And think about this. Once you put this into place, how many more illegal immigrants might say, "Well, I'd like to have a home too." Right? And so I'm going to go and try to get me some of that money. I mean, that's just the nature of things, right? But that's not a problem of immigration. This is a problem of economic policy. And this is what I'm not hearing from the Republican Party. They're not they're not distinguishing between immigration issue, economic policy. And the reality is, if there's an incentive, then you get more of something, right? If you have an incentive for immigrants to not only to come here, but then to remain illegal, which in this case, if they're saying, hey, your immigration status doesn't disqualify you from getting money, then what's the incentive to be an illegal immigrant? They're creating a disincentive. No reason to come over here. Excuse me. So, like, this is bad economic policy because it simply is saying we're going to expand this program to a certain group of people who we have no way of controlling because they can't control for it. And they can't really plan for it. You can at least plan for your citizens like you do a census, you know, who's taxpayer, you know, you have information already on who is a citizen. So therefore you can say, well, and I'm going to make up a number because I don't know the number. I'll just go with Florida. I think Florida has like 22 million people roughly. So like, let's say it was Florida. Florida can say, well, we have 22 million people and we have this many million adults who are in the workforce, and they have that information. And that information changes, but it doesn't change such that you have no eyes on it. Now, illegal immigration, well, that's a different story. That information, that number changes, and you have no eyes on that number. You have no way of controlling for it. You have no way of planning for it. It's just it basically might as well be a random number for all intents and purposes. So that's what California is doing. So let's take a look at something else here real quick. And put something else up on the screen here. So this comes from KFox 14, and I believe they're out of California as well. So let me put this up on the screen so that we can see this. And it says California advances. Let me make it a little bigger. Maybe. There we go. Yeah, California advances 0 down, no payment home loans for undocumented immigrants. All right. So this was posted the 21st. And so here, AB 1840, which already passed the Assembly and now faces a floor vote in the Senate, would prevent the state's California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loans Program. CDA. Okay, so it doesn't spell anything out, but it sure is one heck of a long name. California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loans Program. Appreciate. Okay. From denying individuals on the basis of their immigration status. This program allows applicants to secure loans up to 20%, and they got loans in quotation, by the way, up to 20% of the home's purchase price, or about what a typical down payment is. With 0 down payment, they don't even have to offer some of their own skin on this state loan, and no payments. What? The state's loan can potentially be repaid to the state when the home is refinanced, sold, or transferred, with the borrower paying back the original loan amount plus 20% of any increase in value on the property. It's not clear what happens if a family decides to hold on to a home, as there are no provisions on how long a property can be held for, which means certain kind of trust could potentially allow the loan to not be paid back. In other words, if they keep the home, right, and there are certain legal maneuvers that they could do, they may never have to pay the loan back. Not to mention what future laws may give people grace. So let's think about this. We've been having conversations about education loans, student loans, and forgiveness. So what happens when a bunch of illegal immigrants have applied for this program? They've received money. They've got this house, and they only got to pay back the loan plus 20% if they refinance, if they sell the house, or if they transfer it, which presumably means they bequeath it to like their children. So that, like, what happens when thousands or millions of people buy homes under these circumstances, and then many of them, for whatever reason, become unable to pay this back? This is bad economic policy. This is horrendous economic policy, actually. It's a terrible idea. Like, if you want to solve housing issues, I could not think of a worse way to try to attempt this. This is terrible. It's amazing that you actually are going to offer a loan that may not have to be paid back, and you're doing it in a way where maybe in the future, since they're not making payments, they end up filing bank. Well, what happens is, what happens if somebody falls on hard times and they can't make their payments? I mean, they haven't been making payments, and if they're not refinancing, if they're not selling the home, if they're just like, you know what, throwing their hands up and walking away and like, can't afford it. Sorry, not much I can do. Lost my job. I'm going to move to some other city. I'm gonna move to Florida now. And what happens? Does the state ever get their money? I assume not. I haven't read fully into the details, but I assume they wouldn't. So if they default, then the state never gets their money, presumably. So this is crazy. They're literally just giving money away on a, hey, maybe you pay us back, sometime. Maybe. Or maybe not. Your choice. I mean, they might as well be saying that. This is crazy. So this is, and so I agree. Like, the right, oops, sorry about that. The right, people on the right, Republicans, they're busy fighting culture wars, getting people canceled. I've talked about that, a few episodes back. They're doing all these things instead of talking about economic policy. Now, I know that it's very popular in the libertarian community for people to gripe about immigration, and I think one of the things that we're failing to do is to separate economic policy from immigration. So, for starters, the economic policy that's being laid down is basically saying it's okay to give people money. So, once we accept that, then it's a matter of who, right? Let me tell you this story. It's like a made up story, but it's illustrative. So, a man went up and asked a woman. He says, "Can I take you home with me would you come home and sleep with me for the night for $1,000,000?" And she thinks about it and she's like, "Yeah, $1,000,000, I could use them." So she agrees, $1,000,000. And then he says, okay, well, would you be willing to come and sleep with me for $500,000? And she thinks about it and she's like, that's still a lot of money. And so he's like, okay, cool. So she agrees. So then he's like, all right. So then he says, what about $250,000? She's thinking, she's like, he's going lower, but $250,000, that's still a lot of money. And so then she agrees. So then the man finally goes, all right, would you do it for like $1,000? And he's lowballing her now. So now the woman gets kind of irritated and she's like, sir, what kind of a woman do you think I am? And he says, well, we've already established what kind of a woman you are. We're now negotiating price. It's the same concept. We've already established what economic policy we're willing to accept. Now we're just negotiating on who gets this money. That's it. The root problem is the economic policy. It's not immigration. That's just making the already bad economic policy worse. And that just gives us, instead of focusing on this was a terrible program, we shouldn't be doing it, we should find other ways to assist people. And I put assist in quotation marks. We should find other ways to assist people in getting homes, like deregulating, allowing builders to build, get out of their way, fighting back against the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Again, it happens like some developer, maybe a mile down the road, is looking at building some land, and they have community conversations. And, like I've been in part of these, and the community members will go, well, they want to ask all kind of questions. And I get it. I understand. Like, do they want low rent apartments around the corner from their nice poshy neighborhood? They probably don't, because there goes the neighborhood. Right. But we also have to think that it adds to the increase in home prices. That adds to the reason why people come up with these politicians come up with these ideas and say, well, this is how we got to help Americans afford homes, because we started a long time ago by restricting where and how and the details of building. So then we have to come up with, we have to generate these schemes in order for us to compensate for the bad ideas. And so then we get to a point where we're simply arguing about immigrants. Well, we haven't stopped the bad policy. So, and I think that is a huge problem. Now, there's more to this story, if you will. There's more to this issue about bad economic policy. And we're going to talk about it in just a moment. But first, I want to go to a brief intermission and take a moment to present another libertarian candidate to you folks. So here you go.
I'm Brandon Daugherty, and I'm running for United States Congress in Missouri's 2nd Congressional District. Simply put, Democrats and Republicans have sold themselves out. Neither party cares about the Constitution or the people they are supposed to represent. Both parties have been corrupted by the donor class. The military-industrial complex, big oil companies, big pharma, big tech, and big banks and investment firms have spent billions on congressional campaigns and lobbying efforts in an attempt to buy our elected officials and, in turn, the country. And they have been largely successful. And these same politicians are the ones behind the revolving door between public office and private corporations, whether it be CEOs and board members sitting as cabinet positions for presidents, or administrators and officials becoming cable news hosts. The revolving door is in full swing. I'm fed up. I've had enough of the two-party system. I'm running in this race to give the people in my district an option for change. I'm giving a voice to the people who are fed up with the political games and widespread corruption. I promise to stand on principle and fight against the deep state and the dark money in Washington. Check out my campaign at dartyforcongress.com. For the voters, not the donors.
All right there. Sorry about that. I was doing a couple of other things and got a little bit sidetracked there. So I want to point out something here. Here's a good comment, and I want to make this point this out. So it says, "Let us get and give the benefits of charity without forceful interference." And this is a great comment, Keith. It's something that I think libertarians need to do a better job of. We need to let people know it's not that we don't want things to happen. It's not that we don't want rules in place. We just don't believe that the government is effective at implementing these rules, because they keep carving out exceptions for people, or they just simply make bad rules, whatever, right? Like, how often do they come out and say, all right, we're going to pass this bill because we believe that we need to have this rule in order to accomplish this thing. And then they look back later and then they say, you know what? Turns out that had the opposite effect, or turns out there was some other effect that we weren't, something that was unexpected that came out of this. And then they go back and say, you know what? Let's remove that bill and go back to the way things. They never do that. Never. right? Like repealing something because it turned out to be a bad idea, because it turned out to give you results that you weren't expecting. That doesn't happen. So it's very critical that we talk about it, but then also we point out that a lot of these things would just be shifted to the free market. And I've talked about this in the past, where, for instance, if you're talking about like safety issues, right, you might get more consumer report magazines that come out, and there might be competition between those magazines, those type of magazines, to say, okay, we are going to give you the best indicator of whether or not this particular item is safe. You don't need a government to come out and say, hey, this item is safe. We could simply accomplish that through the free market. And many of these things actually already exist. That's why we can point to existing examples. I can point to consumer reports. I can report to point to, not a point. I can point to other things. There are societies that oversee different groups. So you have, like, if I can't remember the name of the group, but there's an engineering group where, like, they kind of set some of the standards and things along that line. Like, you have these groups that are totally in the free market, right? And they give you an indicator of whether or not, like, this person is considered to be a quality person, or this item is considered to be safe, or whatever. Like, and you can go online, and you can, when I was looking for printers, I was going online, I was like watching people do reviews and say, hey, this printer does this and this and this, but it doesn't do this, it's kind of slow here, blah blah blah. Like, there are plenty of resources on the free market to learn everything you need to know, and then some, about anything before you make a purchase. And that goes from food to household items, right? You can learn about this. And the problem is that when you involve government just keeps taking it further and further and further, and they don't even do a good job. So let's talk about how they end up not doing a good job. So let's move away from this bill, AB 1840, Assembly Bill 1840 in California. It's a terrible bill. It's not a terrible bill because I dislike immigration. I'm comfortable with immigration. And I personally, to the chagrin of many of my libertarian peers, I support a more Ellis Island style, where you get to come in and you're on your own, right? There aren't any programs that are going to help you buy a house. You figure that out, right? Like, that's just it. And if you're willing to come here and figure it out, then great. You're the kind of person that I want coming to this country. And if you're the kind of person that's willing to come here but not figure it out, well, then you can suffer, because we have plenty. Like, America is ripe with opportunity everywhere. And we've shown that in the past. We're still kind of like that today. But if we keep allowing our legislators to pass bills like this, we're not going to be great anymore. There will be no such thing as a Make America Great. It'll be like Make America Great Again by destroying the entire federal government, right? Like that. And we're probably already there in a sense. And I don't mean like a violent revolution. I just mean it's bloated. It's bloated with garbage that isn't doing any favors to the American people, or people that want to be American people. It's not doing any favors. In fact, it's doing harm. So let's take a look over here at President Harris. So here's this interesting article here. And so this is, Harris proposes a $25,000 in down payment assistance to first-time homebuyers, cracks down on corporate landlords. The presidential candidate wants to cut down red tape and build 3 million new units in the next 4 years. That's weird. She's from California, and she's going after, expanding this idea of a down payment assistance, which they already have in California. So California has already had the debate, and they have accepted the idea that, you know what, giving money to people is a good thing from government. Government should find ways to give money to people. And we can We can even find ways to give them to you, give that money to you in a way where you might not even have to pay it back. And so this article goes down and it talks, and here's some highlights. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see it a little bit better up on the screen there. So you zoom in and it says, I'm just going to kind of walk through the bullet points. Provide up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, as well as a $10,000 tax credit. Okay. Then she wants a first ever tax incentive for home builders who build starter homes sold to first-time home buyers. So now they're going to give you this tax incentive. Like if I'm a builder, they're going to say, DL, you can have a tax incentive if you explicitly build homes for first-time home buyers. And we're going to help first-time home buyers by giving $25,000 to people who qualify. So the government's going to give $25,000. Then they're going to give me $10,000. And everybody wants to cry and whine about monopolies. Well, who do you think is having a monopoly on the housing market? It's the government right here. That's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to maintain a monopoly on it. Why? Because they have to. Why do they have to? Because they keep getting involved. And one bill begats another bill. Why? Because the bills are inefficient. I talked about it yesterday, how the free market does a wonderful job. What was it yesterday? It was when I was talking about price gouging. And I said, the reason that price gouging is a good thing is because it accomplishes in one movement what multiple bills can't accomplish. And what I said, just to kind of briefly recap on that, what I said was, if I go to the store and they have suddenly raised the price of a carton of water from like, say, $5 to $15, just making up numbers here. But let's say it's $5 typically. We got a storm coming in. People are freaking out. They're trying to go buy water. So then the store says, all right, we're going to raise this to $15. That's a signal that tells the rest of the market, hey, we need more water here because we have such a demand that $5 is going to cause us to run out. So the way that we ration it is to make it say $15. And so then what happens is somebody from some other city or state, they collect a bunch of water that hasn't raised in price. So maybe it's still $5 there. They drive down and they offer it and they say, well, we're going to get in on it. And so maybe they offer for $15 or maybe they offer it for $14. But eventually what ends up happening is the supply catches up and then the price goes back down. Because once there's plenty of water, that means there's plenty of places to get it from, plenty of choices. And so that means they can start being competitive. And somebody can say, well, you know what? Looks like people aren't buying water nearly as much because they've purchased it. So I'm going to start lowering my price. And then the other guy who brought water in, he got to lower his price too. Right. And then it ends up in a sense like a bidding war, right? Because they're trying to get you to spend your money on this water, especially the people that came and brought it from somewhere else, because they don't want to take the water back. What are they going to do with it? There's no demand. There's no significant demand from where they are. So they have to sell it. And they're just going to keep lowering their price until it gets sold. That's how the free market works. That is how you don't need all these rules, because if you have a rule that says, well, you can't raise your price, well, then you have to have another rule that says, okay, now we're going to limit quantities per household. And then you might have to say, okay, well, that's not working because the mom and dad and two teenagers are all separately buying water under the pretense. So now we're going to have to maybe collect information to make sure that, this household is, they're not sending everybody through a different line at the grocery store, and so on and so forth. Like you just keep having to add new rule to new rule so that people can't get around it. People can't get around the market price when it changes. They have to figure this out. $15 for a pack of water is not the same. I'm sorry. It doesn't change. It's still $15. And for every pack of water, it's going to be $15, whether I go through the grocery line by myself or I go through one line and my wife goes through another. Right. So if she wants, so it doesn't matter if I buy 4 packs of water or if I buy 2 and she buys 2, right? We cut that out. We have no need to do it because the price has accounted for that. Right. And this is what I'm talking about. the government has come in and they've put all these regulations. They say, well, you can't build here. You can't build like this. You can't do this. You can't do this. And so then it boxes builders in, and builders are trying to build on what the market wants. So if the market wants a bunch of homes that the government isn't letting them build, then they're not going to build. They're gonna shift their attention to where the market might want, and that might mean meeting a smaller demand. So think about it in this term: you go to a city, they have regulations on the kind of homes that you can buy, and maybe those aren't the more expensive homes. Okay, so they're low income homes. They say, okay, here are the regulations that are limiting you. So a builder says, okay, well, it's not really fruitful for me to go through all that effort. I'm just going to build homes for the rich people. Well, guess what? The rich people is a relatively smaller pool and they don't have nearly the demand. So now the building may slow down because the builders aren't building a whole bunch of, lower income homes, but they're now building wealthy homes for the wealthy, but they're building fewer of those. Right. And so then the government has to come in and say, well, we're going to offer $25,000 so that people can be a first-time home buyer. And because we need these homes built, we're going to offer you $10,000 tax credit so that you can, so that it makes it profitable for you to want to build these homes. So do you see how all of this works? This is why economic policy should be the number one issue. We should be talking about that. We should not be arguing about, okay, well, are immigrants going to get this money? No, we should be saying, stop giving people money in the first place. Stop regulating in such a way that you have to come up with schemes to incentivize people to do things that they already want to do, but are prohibited from doing. That's what we need to be talking about. Expansion of existing tax incentives for businesses building affordable housing. See, again, like the government doesn't need to come up with these kind of policies unless they're getting in the way in the first place. Removing tax benefits for major investors who acquire large numbers of single-family homes. That's interesting. Wall Street investors have come under fire for scooping up single-family homes around the country since the Great Recession, with critics saying their intrusion into the market. That's funny. Their intrusion, not the government's intrusion, their intrusion into the market has limited the number of homes available to first-time home buyers. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, it's not it's not government's fault. It's the market. The market is doing things that are preventing you from getting homes. But what they're not telling you is that they played a role in the market getting to where it is. How did they play a role? By regulating. They keep regulating and then regulating some more. And then lo and behold, guess what? The wealthy figure out ways to get what they want. And those who are not wealthy, and I mean wealthy, 100 millionaires wealthy. Those of us who are not that, we have to figure out what we can do with the limited amount of means that we have within all of the regulations that are still prohibiting us. This is the problem. Economic policy is the issue. So back to California a little bit. So Vice President Harris comes from California. She's bringing California-esque policies to the national forefront. What might this look like? Well, let me show you what this might look like. Where are we here? I got a couple video clips here that I think are going to be very enlightening if you have not seen them. So California has had a homeless problem for quite some time. You might even remember that South Park made fun of them, like Cartman singing that little song, trying to get rid of the homeless in South Park. And he was like, driving the little bus and they were playing music and he was like, California loves the homeless, and he's basically a spin-off of California Love from Tupac and making it about sending all the homeless to California because California loves homeless people. Well, and that was years ago. That was years ago that they did that video. Well, here's where we are with the homelessness. I want to show you this. So let's see here.
It's such a big issue that, according to the Legislative Analyst's Office, the state invested $24 billion over the last 5 years to
So I just want to point this out. 24 billion. This report came out like a few months ago, earlier this year. $24 billion. California.
Over the last 5 years to curb the problem. But this just released report from the California auditor found the state lacks the proper information to determine the ongoing costs and results of its homelessness programs because the California Interagency Council, or ICH, in charge of overseeing the implementation of Housing First policies, has, quote, not consistently tracked and evaluated the state's efforts to prevent and end homelessness.
What? Wait a minute. They haven't tracked it? What? Like, isn't that their job to track it and say, hey, we're spending $24 billion. We should probably know whether we're getting results.
And that's disappointing.
I would say it was very troubling.
That was
Disappointing. Troubling. You know what I would say? I would say it's an effing outrage. Like, I would be angry. I would use much stronger. I mean, you don't have to swear. I get it. You guys are prim and proper. But you can say something a little stronger than disappointing. It's disappointing that $24 billion was spent and you have no idea how it was spent. You can't track it. Just disappointing.
the reaction from Republican Assemblymember Josh Hoover and Democratic Senator Dave Cortese. They were the bipartisan lawmakers who originally requested the audit to take place. The audit found the ICH Council did track homelessness spending between 2018 and 2021, but not since then. Above that, it showed despite the billions of dollars spent to combat the issue, the number of people experiencing homelessness increased by more than 50%.
Wait. What did you say? He said, despite spending $24 billion that they're not really sure how it's spent exactly, homelessness increased by 50%. Let me put that into raw numbers. If you have 100 homeless people and it increased by 50%, you now have 150 homeless people. Okay? That's huge. That's what spending $24 billion got you. Not a reduction, an increase. That's insane.
Between 2013 and 2023.
Oh, I guess that's the end of that video. Okay. So I guess it ended a bit more abruptly than I realized. Okay. So in California, they spent $24 billion. Now, what does this have to do with potentially President Harris? Well, enter Gavin Newsom. So let's take a look at this montage that somebody neatly put together. I like it. And it's about the homelessness. Maybe. How about we do that? Oh, wrong
It's
one.
such a big issue that, according to the Legislative Analyst's Office,
what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
How are you going to solve homelessness? What are you going to do? It's a new mayor. And I say, well, what are you going to do?
Focus on a housing first model, direct access to housing.
Shelter, salt, sleep, housing with wraparound and support services solve homelessness. Homelessness absolutely can be solved.
Laid out a detailed homeless strategy. There's been no intentionality on homelessness in the state for decades. It's not been a focus.
I don't think we can solve homelessness. I know we can solve homelessness. We will reduce street homelessness quickly and humanely through emergency action. The highest investment the state's ever made is $1 billion on homelessness. We are poised to pass a budget in the next few hours that will provide $12 billion of investment. I can literally quantify 58,000 people that we got off the streets last year. And none of you would believe it.
The state has not made progress in the last 2 decades as it relates to homelessness. Why?
We're not interested in funding failure. We're not interested in failing more efficiently when it comes to the issue of homelessness and the crisis on the street.
All right. So there you have it. From 2008 to 2024, 16 years. 16 years, over a decade. This same man has been promising to resolve the homelessness issue. And just earlier this year, they spent $24 billion, have no idea how it was spent, and they got an increase in homelessness. These are the kind of policies that California regularly indulges in. Kamala Harris is from California. She's being supported by Gavin Newsom. So let's take a look at my last bit of information here. So let's go back to the news articles. And this one is from Yahoo News. And we're just going to take a quick look at it really quickly here. Here you go, up on the screen. Gavin Newsom was a rising star in the Democratic Party. Then Kamala Harris rose faster. So I want you to think about, just think about that headline in the context of everything we just saw. So California is passing a bill that they're likely to pass a bill, right? It depends on how things play out in the Senate. But it's passed their assembly. Now it's moved on. So presuming that it continues to move on, they will pass a bill that permits illegal immigrants to engage in a program where they get money for a home that they may not ever have to pay back, depending on whether or not they play the legal game correctly. That's basically what it amounts to. Are they playing the legal game correctly or not? If they are, then if they do it right, they won't have to pay back the money for $25,000. So they're looking at passing that. Now, this is after all their regulation on homes. This is after all these ideas that they have to implement to try to incentivize the free market to do what it would do without all the regulation. Okay. By regulating and then making it not a profitable venture, then they have to turn around and say, well, that venture that would have been profitable that you're not allowed to do, now we have to carve out a way for you to do it and make it profitable, which basically just means we're going to give you money, a tax break or something like that. And I'm not against tax breaks. Okay. But in the context of this, a tax break so that we can keep the same old failed economic policies in place is not really a good idea. I mean, because it only perpetuates the idea that what we did in the past was acceptable and works. That's all it does. It just kind of adds another layer that you would have to peel back in order to get rid of these bad economic policies. So what else does it say in this article? Well, let's take a look because there's some interesting things here. So let's see here. All right. So there we are. And so up on the screen, it says the Democratic convention once looked like the next stepping stone on Governor Gavin Newsom's march to national prominence. Instead, it's another Californian, Vice President Kamala Harris, in the spotlight, while Newsom moves around Chicago as an advocate for Harris's presidential bid. All right. So then it moves on. And oops, did I mess that up? I might have messed that up. No. There we go. All right. Is that changing? Let's see what's going on here. Give me a second. Didn't seem like it was changing on me here. Oh, I know why. How about that? There we go. I was clicking on the wrong thing. Newsom stood in the front of the hall near the podium and touted the state of dreamers and doers and innovators. He boasted the state's diversity and how we, quote, pride ourselves on our ability to live together. A lot of violence over there in California, but okay. And he turned to Harris, recalling her rise to stardom. He goes on to say, I saw that star get even brighter as Attorney General, as a U.S. Senator, as Vice President of the United States of America. Kamala Harris has always done the right thing. It's time for us to do the right thing and elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States of America, he said. With that, the convention erupted, and Harris made a surprise appearance to thank everyone. How nice of her. Lastly, it says the governor was a major surrogate for President Joe Biden, gaining prominence in Democratic circles over the past year and visiting heavily Republican states such as Alabama to make the party's case. He debated Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who sought the Republican presidential nomination on Fox News last fall. He set up fundraising committees to bankroll his efforts, something that future presidential candidates routinely do. He ran ads supporting abortion. Fights in some states, restricting the procedure. Okay, So, what does all of this mean? Let's package this all together really quickly. He was a rising star, but then people chose Kamala Harris. And he is backing her, and she is starting to put forward ideas that are similar to what California has already done, what Governor Newsom has already done. He has been an elected official at least since 2008 for 16 years. So for 16 years, he has been unable to fix the homelessness problem. In 16 years, he has been unable to figure out immigration in such a way that they can all have homes too, right? Like they just keep allowing illegal immigrants and carving out exceptions. And I know there are laws, I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know there are laws that, like I think sanctuary cities kind of started in California, stuff along that line. And again, the problem, in my opinion, is not immigration so much itself. Okay. Like there are problems there, but when we're talking like in this particular context, the problem here that we need to address that's not being addressed are bad economic policies. And instead, we're fighting over who gets to be a part of these bad economic policies rather than saying we need to roll that back. You roll back all these policies that include illegal immigrants, well, then you remove some of the incentive for them to be here. Not entirely, right? There's more work to be done. But that's one element of all the incentives that say, come here to America illegally. We're going to give you free stuff. Or maybe not quite free, but it amounts to free if you play it right, because you may not have to pay back this $25,000, which is what Kamala Harris is promoting. And so we need to learn to talk about economic policy, but we need to talk about it in a competent manner. We need to say, look, these policies are bad. Why are they bad? Look at how poorly they've done with the homelessness problem. Look how poorly, and I'm talking about they, California in specific, since that's where Kamala Harris comes from, the rising star Gavin Newsom comes from, who is now supporting Kamala Harris and is doing things that may set him up for a future presidency. Okay? So she could be our test run to see how well Americans want people that come from California and are going to bring California policies to the national stage. And right now, it's looking a little scary. That's all I got to say about that, but it is looking a little scary. I'm not sure Trump can win. And I'm not really sure that he would be that much better. He would just be bad in different areas. Conversation for another day. So at the end of the day, we need to start having more conversations about economic policy in a way that makes sense. Hey, we want to give, we want people to be first-time home buyers. Well, have you considered that it might be easier for people to be a first-time home buyer if the government didn't have all of these regulations? What regulations? Well, then we need to have those on hand and know about them and say, well, here's some regulations. Here are some regulations. And look, the regulations that are in place here that have prevented the free market from operating, they're now creating incentives at the government level for people to do the same things that they already wanted to do. Builders want to build homes, and they will build wherever the market tells them to build. If the market suddenly demands a bunch of very expensive homes for whatever reason, that's what they're going to be building. They're going to be building very expensive homes, and they're going to figure out how to do it in a short order. If the market says, man, we need a lot of single family homes, and whatever the market says about those single family homes, whether they need to be townhomes, a nice new subdivision, whatever the case, right? That's what builders are going to do. They say, oh, let's go build. And they won't build as long as there's regulation that either prevents them like outright and says you can't do it, or requires so much of them that it becomes not a very profitable effort. So all we're doing is replacing what the free market would do with government policy. And we have to, like I said, with the price gouging, you have to keep adding more policy to compensate for the fact that no one policy will work as efficiently as pricing in the free market. Pricing in the free market does a number of wonderful things. And there is no policy anywhere of any kind, free market, government, whatever, that will never leave somebody out. Somebody will always be out. We have to learn to accept that. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but there is no magic bullet. There is nothing magical about any policy that you can say nobody got left behind on this. No, there will be somebody, right? And my argument here is that the government is not only inefficient, but we can see in other similar areas. I mean, they couldn't even fix their homeless problem. In fact, they made it worse through their policies. So are they really going to fix the housing problem? Whatever they deem that to be, whether it's not enough people buying homes or not enough immigrants having places to live. It doesn't really much matter. They're not going to fix that any better than they did the homeless problem. And they will probably make it worse. And we have watched it play out for at least 16 years. 16 years, and the citizens of California have not thrown Governor Newsom out on his ass and said, you're a terrible leader. You're not even giving us the results we want. In fact, you made it worse. They should almost physically drag his ass out of office and throw him on the street. Literally. Probably what they should do. I'm not advocating violence, but I'm just saying, after 16 years, $24 billion at least, and then a 50% increase in homelessness, and then you want to turn around and pass bills to deal with first-time home buyers that basically gives them money, and then you want to export that to the national level, and you want to support a candidate who's basically starting along that line. I mean, there's still somewhat different policies, but it's starting. It's starting at the national level. And if Republicans and libertarians and hell, throw them in there too, Democrats won't talk about economic policies, we get everything we deserve. Everything. So somebody's got to start talking about economic policies. And as the Reason article at the very beginning that I showed you said, there's no political home in the left or the right for people that care about economic policies, good economic policies. They're correct. So at this point, your only hope is the Libertarian Party. All right, let's take a look at some comments and see what we got. Yes, I agree. Not so extreme gamers. Somehow Newsom would be worse than Kamala. Lord help us. I actually agree. And I played a clip some few episodes back. He was in an interview, and this was like when he was mayor. And they were asking him point blank, kind of tough questions. It wasn't coming across hostile, but they were tough questions. They were like, how come you haven't been at these events? And he's all like, I go to a lot of events. Like, right. And then they were like, okay, let's talk about the deficit. And he's like, yeah, it's there. We got some work to do on it. And they're like, okay, well, the budget and the problems. And he's like, yeah, there's a lot there. We got to work on it. We're busy working. Like, he didn't actually address why he failed on any of those things, but he was asked and he just weaseled his way out of it. And I was like, when I saw that video interview, and this is back in like the 4:3 ratio, like when it's basically a square box. This is how old it is. Like, he didn't even have widescreen format. And I'm watching this interview and I was just like, this man became governor after this aired. It was on the air, local network, like presumably one that many thousands or maybe even millions of people watched at the time. They saw this interview and they still elected him. He somehow still got elected. That's scary. Like to me, I agree. He would be way worse than Kamala, and Kamala is not going to be a positive for our country. Not when she's offering economic policies like that. No way. But yet, here we are arguing over whether or not immigrants should come here. All the while, economic policies, bad economic policies, are just being laid down for and nobody's really talking about them. And so in the future, we're just going to end up talking about who gets all this free money rather than talking about how do we roll back some of these policies so that people can have the things that they want to have. Go look at your paycheck and just look at how much you pay in taxes. If you weren't paying that in taxes, if you were paying half of it, just think about it, half. Take your paycheck. Let's say you make, you get a paycheck every other week, right? Twice a month, bi-monthly, and just take that. Okay, so you get 26 paychecks a year, right? I think it's 26 paychecks a year. Yeah, 26 a year. No, if it's bi-monthly, then it would be 26. Yeah, that's right. So 26 a year. So what I want you to do is you take your paycheck. I want you to calculate all the money that you're paying in taxes. Okay. And then I want you to multiply that by 26. And that's how much money is being taken from you every year. Now, if you divide that in half, let's say that you're one of those citizens who's like, well, we can't have no taxes. Okay, I'm with you. Take that number. So take your tax number, your total tax number from one paycheck, multiply that by 26. That gives you about what you're paying in taxes every year, at least from your income. And then divide that in half. So imagine how much money what you would be able to do with just half of that. Well, if the government's wasting $24 billion, they don't need all of that tax money, right? We're still playing the game of you are a citizen who believes that we can't go without taxes. Okay, fine. We can go with fewer taxes, considering that government isn't delivering results and they can't even tell us where the money went. And they keep putting out regulations and then having to incentivize people with money to do the things that they would already do if they weren't restricted in the first place. So just imagine what you could do with half of that tax money, that new whatever. Maybe you've been wanting to get some braces. Maybe you want to start a, a 401k. You haven't got that started. Maybe you want to invest it somewhere else. You want to get some cryptocurrency, whatever. Think about it. Maybe it would just take a load off when you're at the grocery store. That's your money that's being spent with these bad economic policies. It's up to you what you do with it, folks. All right. Yes. Keith Garrett says, money printer go burr is another conversation. Why, yes, it is, for another day. But for today, I want to thank you for watching and hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Just for the record, if you are there trying to sell me something and you want to tell me how great my channel is and how you want me to respond to your message or, email you because you're going to totally make my channel that much better, you don't need to leave a comment. But everybody else, please leave me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Remember, last but not least, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for now, I am